What is up, App Nation? You made it. It is part 3 of how to increase your AdMob eCPM. And joining me, like always, is Sid from AppBroda. Look, I'm gonna break down part 1 and 2 first. Part 1 was all about apps in that launch phase. You're trying to find product market fit. You're just getting it out there. Maybe spending a little bit of money just to test the retention. What are the features? Great points there. No mediation. All right. In part 2, we talked about the growth phase. Now that you found product market fit, you're really trying to think about that scale. How do I get more and more users? And you are now thinking about mediation. And Sid really broke down the waterfall versus bidding, which one you should be doing. All right. I'm not going to spoil it. So check out part 2 if you missed that. And in part 3, we're going to talk all about those mature apps. You got 1 million downloads, you got organic users, you've got a product cycle. You're making updates that are planned, scheduled. You're a legitimate company, right? You got some really good users. You got things all planned out. You figured everything out. And now you're like, hey, all these millions of users that we have, hundreds of thousands of active monthly users. What can we do beyond mediation that can really help us increase our ad revenue? So we're going to break it all down right now with my partner in crime, the guy that knows all about this stuff, because frankly, I know nothing and I'm learning with you guys and taking notes with you guys, is Sid from AppBroda. Sid, welcome back to part 3, my friend.
Thanks,
We made
Steve.
it.
Thanks for me having me for the third time, man. I know we made it, and I hope
We're
all the
longtime
users
friends
out there,
now.
all your video. I I know, man.
I love it, man.
We've done so many videos together. I
Yeah.
feel that I'm part of App Nation now, man.
I love it, man. You are definitely that. All right, Sid. Well, I'm going to hand over the floor to you. It is all yours. Help us increase more monies. I've done it, Sid. I made it, man. I've got lots of users. Now I need to just make more money from each user that I have.
Correct, and that's exactly where you are right now. Now, think of it from a simple scenario, right? You've got good amount of DAU, you've got a stable income in place. Now, the only simple way to look at it is to increase your competition, right? Increasing your competition means that for every ad request, every user that you have, you're making multiple people compete for it. You're saying that, guys, this actually user is much more valuable than you think you're paying for. So give me a better rate for it. And that's exactly what we want to do today. We want to help you understand how to get a better buck for each user that you have. Now, let's start with the most basic thing, form a baseline. Now, when I say form a baseline, it's important to understand the historical performance of your entire app. Now, if you watched part 2 of the video, I said and I talked about setting up mediation, right? And if you've already done that, if you've already sort of mediation and experimented with a lot of things, you would have historical data available, right? And this is where it becomes really tricky because that's where a lot of data analytics will now start kicking in. You'll have to have a dedicated team who's looking at this on a regular basis. And I'll tell you, I'll get into a minute as to why that's important, right? So, again, like I said, let's start forming the baseline. Let's look at the historical performance. And the three things you should sort of segment that is on format, devices, and geo. For each one of them, you can actually look at a different ad network. Let me give you a few examples. Now, let's say geography, right? Besides Google and Facebook, most ad networks are designed to work in certain geographies. In simple terms, you have to think of it like sales team, right? Essentially, there is a sales team sitting at the end of the company where who's going and selling ads and saying, okay, guys, I have these 10 apps. I want you to start putting these ads here because they're supremely relevant. The users are amazing here. So wherever their sales team are present, that's where you're getting the most eCPM from. So I'll give you an example. AppLovin. AppLovin does phenomenally well in the US. But maybe if you go to an India, it might not give you the best eCPMs. Similarly, if you're looking at format, format is also supremely important because again that it ends and boils down to what sales teams are finally selling at the end of the day. So if you have rewarded video, one partner that I have heard across does really well is Unity. So it is important to understand what formats, what geographies, what devices that you have, and device is also a third parameter which I talked about. Again, it's an important way to sort of segment these devices, go into high, mid, low pricing devices, and sort of see where your audiences are, what your audiences looks like, and what ad networks, current ad networks that you have, and how are they performing. Now, the next logical step would be have a list of partners that you feel would be really relevant for these. Start talking to all the partners and understand, okay, guys, I have this kind of audiences, this is the kind of formats, this is the kind of devices, the kind of geo. What can you do? What kind of ECPMs can you work with us? How can you help us? Each of them will come back with answers in terms of what works really well for them, what kind of audiences they have, what kind of campaigns they run. So understand, build your knowledge on that, and start working on it. Now, once you have all this information in place, then start looking at your mediation strategy. If you remember what we spoke in video 2, we talked about setting up your bidding in place. But the limitation with bidding is not all partners are available on bidding. So the smart thing now to do is actually to look at bidding and waterfall at the same time. One is just not enough in today's world. So you've got to sort of segment your audience and look at mediation and bidding. Set up your ad networks in such a way that they look at geo, format, device, and start understanding how they're clubbed. It is also interesting to always club ad networks which have similar eCPMs in a certain group, and then club them by geo, club them by format, club them by device. This seems like a lot. This seems like a lot of work, right? But it's extremely important you get this set up in place, because once you do, everything now then starts falling in place, and little optimization will come in place. A little while back I said you need to start looking at data, and this is where this comes in handy, because each of these smaller segments you'll have to start analyzing, start looking at what's working and what is not, because the scale you're at, little optimizations on each of these subsets will have a very massive jump in your revenue. Now, while you're doing this, it's also important that all of these ad networks have a seasonality. Seasonality simply means that there are certain months that they will have extremely high CPM, certain months they will have extremely low CPM. Now, if I tell you that March is a better month than April for AppLovin, that's unfortunately not true. Because essentially, like I said, at the end of the day, there is a sales team sitting out there who's actually selling, and uh, it's impossible to predict when it's going to go up or down. But what you can do is set up control groups in your ecosystem that allows you to understand the seasonality of all these ad networks. Take a small percentage of your audience and put small partners there to understand if there is a seasonality spike. You've got to figure out these uptakes in seasonality so that you can change the mediation stack and ensure you put a partner up in Waterfall. Now, again, this seems like a lot of work, man, but guys, this is very important to get your ECPM up. We've seen developers have massive spike in ECPMs just because they get their strategy in place. Now, another very interesting thing, and I think this is where GAM comes in place, or Google Ad Manager or AdX, what we talk about, is bid optimization and direct deals. But again, that's a conversation for another day. We'll talk about AdX separately. But this is a really good setup in place. You should get this done. The other strategy that you can look at is defining your ad experience by country. Now, this might not work for everybody, but if you have audiences in 2 or 3 countries which contribute about 70 to 80% of your audience with 20, 20, 30% split, it's also important to understand that you split your experience in a way that works for a certain country. Right. If and Again, this is very generic approach that I'm talking about here, but for example, if you think about Rewarded is a great format that has extremely high demand in the US. So if you're looking at US audiences which are extremely mature, which have a lot of competitor apps who might be doing IPs, who have clear ad experiences, who are deeper pockets, it is important to understand, maybe you got to reduce your interstitials there, right? Focus on Rewarded as a format, get our users to understand the experience, give them that ability to do it. But for example, if you're looking at tier 3 markets or tier 2 markets, such as India, Brazil, Vietnam, where users are still, you've got larger volumes, you've got extremely large volumes, but the ECPMs are low, and maybe your iteration's a little okay there. So what you can do is you can increase the ad experience, because every other app in the ecosystem has high ad experiences. So you've got to understand and study each market separately, understand what your competitors are doing, understand what the geography is about, what kind of ad experiences these guys are used to, and then build your ad experience accordingly. This also has massive impact on your revenue. So these two strategies extremely important.
Sid, how granular should we get when it comes to the devices? Is it as simple as, hey, here's an iPhone versus here's an Android? Or do we figure out like, hey, these Android devices are super, like it's a Google Pixel and this is like a Moto XP or whatever it's called. But like, should we get that granular in terms of optimizing the ad experience for the device?
Great. So you don't need to get really granular, man. The idea is to break into larger buckets. Three buckets is usually something that has worked really well. You have high-end devices, mid-end devices, and low-end devices. The list of which is easily available online. Go online, search for these devices. You'll get a list of them. AdMob provides these lists, so you can sort of bucket these devices really well. But don't go too granular. Just make it into three broader buckets that you operate in.
I love it. All right. One thing I want to say, you guys, look, we broke it down. Sid is probably tired. He's a tired man right now. We have 5 different
I
videos
know,
all
man.
about AdMob. And in this 3-part, part 1, launch, part 2, growth, and part 3, he covered it all in terms of mature apps. Now, if you're interested in how to optimize your ad revenues, how to increase more eCPMs, I want to read a quote real quick from AppRoda. Nayan says, I was facing low eCPM issues in most of my apps. I tried using a few strategies of my own, but could not do much. With AppRoda's plug and play optimization suite, I saw great results and couldn't be happier. So go check him out. It is appbroda.com. He shared a ton of knowledge for you guys. Sid really knows his stuff. Once again, it is appbroda.com. Sid, if the audience wants to connect with you in any other way, do you want to send them anywhere else?
No, man, I think AppRoad is a great way to start. We've got a lot of reading material for you to go and study. Just go to our website, fill up the form, speak to a specialist, and they'll get you started with something which is completely relevant for you and get you started ASAP.
I love it. Once again, appbroda.com. Sid, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all, and I'll see you on the next video.